There's a person you probably know who has never posted a photo of their relationship, their hardest week, or the inside of their home. They have social media, they scroll, they might engage on other people's posts. But when something significant happens in their own life, a new relationship, a loss, a moment that meant something, it doesn't appear online. The moment belongs to them. The people who were actually there know. Everyone else doesn't. And that isn't an accident. The world tends to read this as secretive, as aloof, as some kind of social withholding, an implied difficulty with connection. But the reason isn't what most people assume. It has nothing to do with being secretive or difficult. It has to do with something psychologists formally identified in the early 1990s, one that completely reframes what privacy actually is, not as the absence of sharing, but as something far more precise, something this group has been doing intuitively their entire lives without ever having a name for it. Something significant happens in your life, a relationship milestone, a hard week, a thing that meant something, and you just don't post it. Not because there's nothing to say, not because you're hiding it, but because the idea of that specific moment existing in a public space, commentable, screenshotable, visible to everyone who follows you, it feels like a quiet violation of something you can't fully name, something that should stay where it happened. There's a sharper version of this. Someone tags you in a photo you didn't choose to share. An immediate tightening happens, reflexive, almost physical, like something of yours was moved without asking. And there's the version you don't say out loud. When people ask why you don't post more, you give the vague answer. And now I just prefer to keep things private. Because the real answer feels like too much to justify to someone who seems genuinely unbothered by all of it. And somewhere along the way, you've asked yourself, quietly, why does this matter so much to me when other people seem genuinely fine with it? Communication research has a specific answer to that question, and it is not what most people assume. The cultural default reading of people who don't share online, they have something to hide. They're antisocial, closed off. But this reading works from a model of privacy built before digital life existed, and it has not been updated. For most of human history, privacy wasn't a choice you made about an app. Information about your life traveled at the speed of trust, slowly, selectively, through the people physically present in your world. The idea that a private moment could instantly exist in a space accessible to hundreds of people you barely know would have been structurally impossible. Psychology needed a new model, and it got one. In 1991, communication scholar Sandra Petronio published Communication Privacy Management Theory, one of the most applied frameworks in privacy research. Her foundational finding: people don't experience their private information as something they're withholding. They experience it as something they own. And the decision to share is not about open or closed. It is the decision to grant someone else co-ownership of a piece of your life. When you share something private with someone, they become a co-owner of that information. They carry it. They have responsibility for how it moves. Here's the specific thing this tells us. When you post something on social media, you don't transfer ownership to one trusted person. You transfer it to everyone who can see it, including people you've never met. The platform itself. Advertisers. Anyone who screenshots. A 2024 study in current psychology found that people with higher perceived control over their personal information disclose significantly less online, not because they're less connected, but because their co-ownership calculation is more conscious. They evaluate who receives their information before they grant access. The person who doesn't post their private life isn't withholding connection. They're being precise about who gets co-ownership of what is most theirs. But here's what the world consistently gets backwards about these people. The assumption is that they're closed off, secretive. The research says the opposite, and I'll show you exactly why. Clinical psychologist Dr. Stephanie Regan found something that inverts the usual framing. The people most likely to post intimate details of their lives online are people who are, in her words, nervous socially or less sure of themselves, for whom posting is a bid for connection, a request for external confirmation. Posting says, validate this for me. The person who doesn't send that bid has something the person who does is still trying to build. And now here's the part that changes the whole picture. Petronio's theory describes something she calls boundary turbulence, the specific psychological distress that occurs when someone violates your privacy rules, when they share something you considered private, when they tag you without asking. That turbulence is not a sensitivity problem. It is the precise signal that a co-ownership agreement was broken, that something which belonged to you, when was transferred to others without your consent. The tightening you felt when someone shared something of yours without asking, that wasn't an overreaction. That was ownership, correctly identifying a violation. Let's name what not posting costs first. You've been called mysterious, closed off, difficult to read. You've had to explain, more than once, why you don't post the relationship, the trip, the hard thing you went through while everyone else was narrating their version publicly. You've watched other people get genuine warmth and community from sharing, and there are moments when you've honestly wondered if you're denying yourself something real. That cost exists. The friction is real. The explaining is real. And here's what that cost actually means you are. It means you have a system, a deliberate, conscious one, that evaluates co-ownership before it grants it. That distinguishes between the people who have earned the right to know the inside of your life and the people who simply happen to follow you. What the world calls withholding, Petronio's 3 decades of privacy research calls something else. It calls it ownership, the most fundamental form of dignity a person can hold over their own experience. What looks like distance is selectivity, and selectivity is not the absence of openness. It is a more precise, more deliberate form of it, one that reserves the most important parts of your life for people who have demonstrated they'll protect it. There is a difference between an audience and a witness. An audience sees what you perform. A witness knows what actually happened. You have been building a life full of witnesses, not audiences. And that is not something to explain or justify. It is something to recognize for what it is. Or the tightening you felt when someone tagged you in a photo you didn't choose, when something private appeared in public without your consent. That wasn't oversensitivity. That was ownership recognizing a violation, and the quiet consistency with which you've kept the most important parts of your life off the feed. The relationship, the hard week, the thing that meant something. That is not secrecy. It is not distance. It is the discipline of a person who understands that not everything that is yours needs to be seen to be real. Some of the most meaningful things in a life never make it to a feed, not because they don't deserve to exist, but because they exist more fully in the hands of the people who were actually there. You were never closed off. You were just specific about who gets a key. So if this finally put words to something you've been called difficult for, subscribe to The Quiet Healing. Every week we explore the psychology behind the choices most people explain away instead of examining. And if you've ever deleted social media or quietly stopped narrating your life online at all, our recent videos on those topics will show you the same boundary from the same angle. You were never withholding. You were just choosing your witnesses carefully. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on my future uploads.